Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the San Francisco Historical Society. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And also thank you to the online audience. I understand there's more than 100 people watching tonight. So welcome to all of you who are watching from home as well. I'd like to take a moment and thank our two sponsors, the Canadian Women's Club of the San Francisco Bay Area and the Jessica and Matt Adams Grigoroff Family Fund. Sponsoring History Live is something new we're doing, and we're inviting individuals and businesses to sponsor us. There are different sponsorship levels and get a number of benefits from sponsorship. So I hope you will consider that sometime. And I'd also like to remind everyone here, in case you don't know, that the Historical Society's biggest fundraiser of the year is coming up on October 17th, just next week. It's a luncheon at the Mark Hopkins Hotel. You can find it on the website or scan this QR code. And even if you can't attend the luncheon, you can participate in the online auction. We've got a lot of great things. It's super easy to register, and it's fun to find things you like and just bid on them. So I encourage everyone to support us in one of those two ways. And now, without further ado, I'm handing the mic over to John Freeman, the program coordinator.
Thank you, Lana. Our speaker tonight has given two programs for this organization, both of which were fun and lively, and maybe tonight's going to be fun and lively too. I have no idea. But anyway, it was using outcuts, or at least it was using some material from movies, and he stitched together two fabulous programs. So we're really getting a major pivot tonight, because this is not going to involve 35 millimeter film. It's not going to be, or maybe it was even larger than that. It's going to involve a topic that we've never touched before, and I'm so glad we are. So without further ado, Jim Van Buskirk.
Right on.
Come to your mic.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. I know I have some friends in the audience here, and I have some friends out in television land. So let me tell you a little bit about this project. This is sort of a visual timeline of some of the pioneering individuals, organizations, publications, activities in San Francisco during the 100 years between 1869 and 1969. And each one of these could be its own entire program. So this is going to be really quick, really dirty. And the genesis for this presentation grew out of research that I began in the early 90s when Susan Stryker and I were working on Gay by the Bay. And then it continued through a series of exhibits called Queer as German Folk that was sponsored by the Goethe Institute in 2019. And I sort of see this presentation as maybe a prequel or a contextualization of the program that Lori Ungaretti did for the Historical Society in June. She and I ran into each other at the San Francisco History Center at the San Francisco Public Library, where we were both doing research. And she told me a little bit about her story, and I told her that that was a program. And so if you haven't seen it, it's on the website, and I urge you to see it. And this was sort of, as I say, the prequel. So let's get rolling. This is an image about the San Francisco the Stonewall Rebellion, which, as many of you may know, was a series of spontaneous, violent demonstrations by queer people against the police raid in Greenwich Village. This was in New York in June of 1969. And this is a very important incident. It's celebrated worldwide as the beginning of the modern lesbian and gay civil rights movement. However, as you will see, there was lots going on all over the country prior to this significant event. So the image that we're seeing now is the Stonewall Inn taken in September 69, just a couple months after the event. And the sign in the window reads, "We homosexuals plead with our people to please help maintain peaceful and quiet conduct of the streets of the village." And it's signed Mattachine. And we're going to be meeting the Mattachine Society a little bit later. So this fellow may or may not look familiar. This is Karl Maria Bentkirk, an Austrian-born Hungarian journalist, memoirist, and human rights advocate. And this is the person who coined the words heterosexual and homosexual in 1869. So in two important pamphlets, which were published anonymously, and I like to use these because we sort of think homosexual, heterosexual, it must have been around forever. But the label, the terminology, which ultimately became an identity, is only 100 years prior to the Stonewall exhibition. And then other researchers, such as Richard von Krafft-Ebing, borrowed the term, and they became standard. This is Laura DeForest Gordon. So now we're in San Francisco, and this she wrote a note on her booklet, The Great Geysers of California and How to Reach Them. And this was found in the Cogswell time capsule in Washington Square Park in 1979. So in 1879, she had written a note on her book saying that she was a lover of her own sex. So we are everywhere, and we've been everywhere for a long time. This is an image of Elvira Virginia Margaretta, who was born in San Francisco, assigned female at birth in December of 1869, and lived as a male. He was known variously as Jack B. Garland, Babe Bean, Jack Bean, Jack Maines, B.B. Bean, Ben Garland, and he was mostly in the Tenderloin district where he had erotic relationships with young men. So this would be an early example of transmasculine, or what used to be referred to as female to male young man. He enlisted in the Army. He worked as a journalist, as a nurse, and as an adventurer, living in a male social role for nearly 40 years. Now, this individual should look familiar to some of you. This is Oscar Wilde, who visited San Francisco on March 27, 1882, and we all know his famous quote from The Picture of Dorian Gray. "It's an odd thing, but everyone who disappears is said to be seen at San Francisco. It must be a delightful city and possess all the attractions of the next world." In 1885, Austrian native Jenny O arrived in San Francisco. Cross-dressing had been a crime here since 1863 because cross-dressing was associated with prostitution and other forms of indecency. So it was a target of San Francisco officials who sought to purify the city. As a man, O was an itinerant bookseller, invested in property, and traveled for German newspapers. Indoors, O, as a woman, helped with children and provided accommodation for dance hall women. Jenny O reported that she wore men's clothing in public for fear of arrest in the 1890s. Performances of gender crossing on stage for public amusement remained protected and celebrated, while challenges to real-life gender roles, especially women's claims to the rights and privileges of white men, were suppressed. So here we see 4 portraits of Jenny O in male attire, nude with genitals exposed, nude with the genitals tucked between her legs, and in women's attire. And this is from Magnus Hirschfeld's book, The Transvestites, from 1912. And we're going to meet Magnus Hirschfeld a little bit later. This is an image of Marie Equi, who in 1897 left Oregon with her girlfriend Bessie Bell Holcomb and moved to San Francisco. In 1899, Marie enrolled at the College of Physicians and Surgeons in San Francisco as a first-year medical student. Women represented only 6% of U.S. physicians, and Marie pushed through the boundaries of class, gender, and sexual orientation on her way to becoming a medical doctor. In 1903, after 2 transfers and a move to Portland with a new girlfriend, Mary Ellen Parker, Dr. Equi graduated from the University of Oregon Medical Department. She eventually set up a general practice in Portland with a focus on obstetrics, gynecology, and pediatrics. So if you haven't read Michael Hellquist's fabulous biography of Marie Equi, I strongly recommend it. In 1903, Charles Warren Stoddard wrote, "For the pleasure of his company, an affair of the misty city." This was an early gay autobiographical novel set in San Francisco. He was best known for his travel writing about Polynesia, but his only novel, begins, "Here you have my confession." And so strictly autobiographical are most of his writings that Stoddard hoped that by supplying a few missing links, he would enable the reader to trace out the whole story of his life. So it could be serving as a guidebook. This is a sad story. In 1903, John Chafee died in San Francisco, and his life partner, received word by mail that his lover had died and killed himself with a shotgun just a couple months later. The two had left Boston together in January 1849, arriving in San Francisco at the height of the gold rush. And they had stable jobs and good pay, but they left together for Calaveras County to try their luck at gold mining, and in 1853 settled in a small rural settlement in Groveland, Tuolumne County. Chafee focused on mining. Chamberlain farmed and maintained an apple orchard, and the pair lived there for the next 50 years. And they were known as a couple. Everyone accepted them as a couple. And it's believed that Bret Harte may have used them as models for his short story, Tennessee's Partner, which was published in the Overland Monthly in 1869. The Dash. This is considered one of San Francisco's very first gay bars. It opened in 1908 at Pacific and Kearny, and as the Seattle Saloon and Dance Hall, it was the first dive to open after the '06 earthquake. So the city may have had gay bars before the Dash, but none were quite as notorious. The bar featured cross-dressing waiters who performed sex acts for $1 in the booths. After a high-profile judge was linked to the bar, he was shut down by the Vice Squad almost as soon as it opened, leading to a reform movement that helped shut down the infamously sexually liberated Barbary Coast district. And we're going to see, as we move through the century, sort of liberation and oppression and the backlash to the openness. This is an image of Alexander Berkman, who was an anarchist associate of Emma Goldman. And on June 1915, he did a public presentation called Homosexuality and Sex Life in Prison. He attracted quite a large crowd. This is Dr. Albert Abrams. One of the earliest medical articles on how to recognize homosexuals in the United States was written by Dr. Abrams, called Homosexuality, a Military Menace. Was published here in San Francisco in 1918. This is Elsa Gidlow, who moved to San Francisco in 1926 from New York at the invitation of Kenneth Rexroth, known as the father of the San Francisco Renaissance. And Gidlow is best known for writing On a Gray Thread, published in 1923. It's considered the first volume of openly lesbian love poetry published in North America. And in 1954, Gidlow purchased Druid Heights, a rustic retreat near Mill Valley, which became a spiritual home to a number of influential writers and thinkers. Her autobiography, Elsa, I Come With My Songs, was published in 1986 and offers a detailed account of seeking, finding, and creating a life with other lesbians at a time when little was recorded on the topic. So this is considered one of the very first lesbian autobiographies in which the author does not use a pseudonym. It offers a superb account of one eyewitness participant's view of the 20th century artistic bohemian life and of the cultural history of the San Francisco Bay Area. Finocchio's. How many of you ever went to Finocchio's? Okay. So in 1929, it opened as a speakeasy. It was called the 201 Club at 406 Stockton Street. And then in 1933, with the repeal of Prohibition, the club moved upstairs and began offering female impersonation acts. It opened at a larger location in 1936 at 506 Broadway, where it closed on November 27th, 1999. During the 30s, San Francisco's first homosexual bathhouses, Jack's Turkish Baths and the 3rd Street Baths, opened. Jack's was one of San Francisco's longest-running bathhouses, in operation from about 1936 through the 1980s. And it was a men's-only bathhouse, open day and night, described by an early visitor as, it had as many small cubicles, each with a cot, chair, closet, and locking door as possible. A steam room, warm room, masseurs, showers, tea room. By midnight on Friday and Saturday night, the baths was filled to beyond capacity. Someone spread the rumor that the UC football team came over from Berkeley every Monday evening, and the place was mobbed. So it became quite the sight. And okay, here's Magnus Hirschfeld. We heard reference to him earlier. On February 24th, 1931, he arrived in San Francisco for a 10-day sojourn. He gave public talks, he paid social and professional calls, and visited tourist sites. He's referred to as the Einstein of sex, and that's because he was a pioneering German physician, sexologist, and author who co-founded the Scientific Humanitarian Committee in Berlin, the world's first homosexual emancipation committee. The Black Cat. In 1933, this bohemian hangout opened at 710 Montgomery Street, and the bar was at the center of one of the earliest court cases to establish legal protections for gay people in the United States, when in 1950, Saul Sluman, owner of the Black Cat, challenged the state Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission's attempt to close his bar. The California Supreme Court decided for the first time that bars cannot be discriminated against solely for catering to homosexuals. And despite this victory, continued pressure from law enforcement agencies eventually forced the bar's closure in 1964. One of the fun things about doing the research for this program was discovering information I didn't know. Maybe all of you know it. So Rod McKuen was born on April 29th, 1933, in a Salvation Army hostel in Oakland, California. And although he refused to identify as gay, straight, or bisexual, the actor, who was also, as you know, a poet and singer and songwriter, was active in the LGBT rights movement. As early as the 1950s, he held a leadership role in the San Francisco chapter of the Mattachine Society, which was one of the nation's earliest LGBT advocacy organizations. He once explained his sexuality by saying, "I can't imagine choosing one sex over the other. That's just too limiting. I can't even honestly say I have a preference." Well, that said, look at the cover of this 1977 album. I'm not going to say anything about it, except that McKuen spoke out against singer Anita Bryant's Save Our Children campaign to repeal anti-discrimination ordinances in Miami, and he coined the nickname for her called Ginny Orangeseed, and included on this album is a song called Don't Drink the Orange Juice. He often gave benefit performances to aid LGBT rights organizations and to fund research. But I think the cover of that album says it all. In April 1935, San Francisco native Alice B. Toklas returned to the Bay Area with her partner Gertrude Stein. And when Stein visited East Oakland to see the house where she had lived at 13th Avenue and 25th Street, it had been razed. The property was built over with little houses. And she observed there was no there. But that comment has been repeatedly misinterpreted as a diss to Oakland. What she meant was the house that she lived in was no longer standing. Here we are at Mona's, San Francisco's first openly lesbian bar, which opened in 1936 at Broadway and Columbus in North Beach. It marketed itself as a place where girls can be boys, and featured female waitstaff and entertainers dressed in tuxedos. Mona's was geared toward the local gay community as opposed to some of the other venues which were catering to gay tourists. Becoming one of the most popular lesbian bars in the United States, it helped pave the way for more lesbian bars to open in the neighborhood, making North Beach a well-known lesbian enclave. August 1944, San Francisco poet Robert Duncan acknowledged his own homosexuality in his landmark essay, The Homosexual in Society. This was one of the first public defenses of homosexuality in the United States. He was a key figure in the San Francisco Renaissance and often collaborated with his romantic partner, Jess Collins, and we see the two of them here. And I'm just going to read a short passage from his important essay. It must be always recognized that the others, those who have surrendered their humanity, are not less than oneself. It must be always remembered that one's own honesty, one's battle against the inhumanity of his own group, be it against patriotism, against bigotry, against, in this special case, the homosexual cult, is a battle that cannot be won in the immediate scene. The forces of inhumanity are overwhelming, but only one's continued opposition can make it any other order possible, will give an added strength for all those who desire freedom and equality to break at last those fetters that seem now so unbreakable. August 1944. One of these two women might look familiar. In January 1949, Susan Sontag, while she was a student at UC Berkeley, and shortly after her 16th birthday, met Harriet Summers Zwerling, who introduced her to San Francisco's queer bohemian scene at the Black Cat, the Paper Doll, 12 Adlers, Mona's, all those North Beach bars we talked about, as well as the Tin Angel in Sausalito. And after their brief affair, Sontag wrote, "My concept of sexuality is so altered. Thank God. Bisexuality as the expression of fullness of an individual, I know now a little of my capacity. The wonderful widening of my world, which I owe to Harriet, everything begins from now. I am reborn." This is an image of the Langley Porter Clinic where Dr. Carl Bowman and Bernice Engel published The Problem of Homosexuality. This was one of a number of reports during the 1950s and 60s discussing the effects of castration, lobotomy, and electroshock treatment on homosexuals. This was published in 1953. Now, shall we all sing a rousing chorus of I Left My Heart in San Francisco? One of the things that we learned while researching Gay by the Bay was that Douglas Cross and George Corey were songwriters, yes, and they were also lovers. And they had moved to Brooklyn and they were homesick for San Francisco. So they wrote, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. And as many of us know, that song was popularized by Tony Bennett at a December 1961 concert at the Fairmont Hotel's Venetian Room, and in 1969 was widely adopted by the city and county of San Francisco as one of its 2 official anthems. Extra points. What's the other? Thank you. I knew you'd know. San Francisco, the title song from the 1936 film San Francisco. And over 20 years later, George Corey, who was now elderly, would underwrite a new show for his friend Hibiscus. Hibiscus famed for Coquettes and the Angel of Light. And the show was Femme Fatale, The Shocking Pink Life of Jane Champagne, which was at the Montgomery Playhouse in San Francisco. That was in August of 1976. But we're back to the 50s, September 8th, 1954. Here are Grace Miller and Joyce Vanderveer, who were bartenders at 12 Adler Place and Tommy's Place. They're being arrested for contributing to the delinquency of minors. These 2 lesbian bars were alleged to be rendezvous points for teenage girls to gain access to alcohol, marijuana, drugs, and older lesbians. The sensationalistic headlines in the San Francisco Chronicle, the bar, police says, has long served as a happy hunting ground for a group of adult debauchees who recruited schoolgirls into their academy of dope addiction and sexual perversion. Unfortunately, it was headlines like that that exacerbated the vulnerability of these venues, and there was a citywide crackdown. And possibly as a result of that, on October 19th, 1955, the first lesbian organization in North America was founded by 4 lesbian couples. The Daughters of Bilitis, the DOB, was founded by 4 couples, including Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, as a social club, as a place to meet other women because of the hazards of meeting in lesbian bars. The following year, the latter, the monthly publication of the DOB, began publication, and the first National Lesbian Convention organized by the DOB took place in San Francisco in 1960. This is an image of the Mattachine Society, the early homophile organization formed by Harry Hay in Los Angeles in 1950, and it moved its headquarters to San Francisco in 1956 with Hal Call as president of the society. And I like to tell the backstory of this image, which many of you have probably seen. So as you might know, the Mattachine Society was founded as on the structure of the Communist Party. Harry Hay was a former communist, and so it was a cell structure. And nobody knew all the pieces. And of course, the men couldn't even come into the same space at the same time. The windows were shuttered. They would come in the back door, the front door, all at different times. And so absolutely no photography under any circumstances. Well, I happened to meet John Gruber, who took this photograph, and he explained the circumstances under which it was taken. He was a bit of a prankster, and Harry was a bit of an authoritarian. And so John took it upon himself to walk across the room with the camera dangling on his arm And he got to the middle of the room, hit click, and kept walking. And Harry said, "What was that? What was that? I heard something. Did somebody take a picture?" And John denied it. So this is a really important document with that otherwise we would not have. It's been reproduced, as you know, many, many, many times in many different places. In 1955, Hal Call co-founded the Pangraphic Press, which printed the Mattachine Review and also the Ladder and other homophile publications. He also founded Dorian Book Service, which was a gay and lesbian literature clearinghouse. And Hal was one of the few openly gay men who spoke about gay issues, appearing on local television programs throughout the 1950s. And we're going to see him again. This is an image from February 19th, 1956. San Mateo County Sheriff Earl Whitmore declares that homosexuals harried by police in San Francisco will find no refuge in his county. His warning was following a raid on Hazel's Inn near Sharp Park in Pacifica that led to the arrest of 77 men, 10 women, and 3 teenagers. The tavern began attracting attention when it grew from a relatively quiet place with a few patrons to an operation that regularly attracted between 250 and 500 people on the weekends. So here's an image of Allen Ginsberg, author of Howl, and Lawrence Ferlinghetti, owner of City Lights Bookstore. This is September 6, 1957, when they were tried on charges of selling obscene literature because of the poem's descriptions of male homosexuality. And I want to call your attention to a wonderful exhibit here at the San Francisco Historical Society, all about Lawrence Ferlinghetti and his incredible contributions to San Francisco in terms of art, literature, culture. So it runs through March 26th, 2025. So you have plenty of time to get down here and check it out. This is 1959. George Christopher, the incumbent mayor, and his chief of police are accused by city assessor Russ Walden during the mayoral campaign of allowing San Francisco to become the national headquarters of organized homosexuals in the United States. In 1965, the grand jury indicted Russ Walden for bribery and conspiracy, and a jury convicted him of 9 felony counts, and he was sentenced to state prison for from 1 to 14 years. So that might be the pot calling the kettle black. And on May 3rd, 1960, a controversial gay-ola scandal was launched when a state ABC official was caught taking a bribe from the Castaway, a Market Street gay bar, and he was later acquitted. So here we have Brian Ray on the left, and who was a gay bartender, and Norman Tullis on the right, a gay bar owner, and they're waiting to testify during the Gayola trials. And like the other gay witnesses in the Gayola trials, they were urged to project a professional image by wearing suits and ties. In 1961, Guy Strait started the League for Civil Education, LCE, to organize a gay vote in San Francisco. So he began publishing the LCE News and distributing it free in bars. This novel, The Gay Detective, was released in 1969 under the pseudonym Lou Rand. Louis Randall Hogan capitalized on his intimate knowledge of San Francisco in this, his first publishing endeavor. The novel followed a private investigator trying to solve the murder of a young gay man, and his humor depended on the character's complicated play with the conventional gender norms popularized in hard-boiled crime fiction. So this book provided a guided tour of post-war San Francisco places and personality. So it's loosely fictionalized, but still recognizable. And then as we see, it was republished in 1965 as Rough Trade. In 1961, José Sarria, who was a flamboyant, charismatic, and immensely popular waiter and drag performer at the Black Cat, kicked off his campaign for San Francisco supervisor. He was the first openly gay man to run for public office, and he received 5,600 votes in 1961. This is September 11th, 1961, when KQED broadcasted The Rejected, the first television documentary on homosexuality. It was originally titled The Gay Ones and later syndicated to national educational TV stations. It was a 60-minute program produced by John Rivas and Irving Saraf and featured legal, medical, and religious experts discussing the social problem of homosexuality. September 14th, 1961, the largest vice raid in San Francisco history took place when police arrested 81 men and 14 women at the Tay Bush Inn, an after-hours club. Authorities emphasized to local reporters that same-sex dancing occurred inside the bar, but the San Francisco Chronicle described the arrestees as white, middle-class, passive victims herded like sheep into patrol wagons. And one story I like to tell about this, I knew about this raid for many, many years, but it didn't really register that the Tay Bush Inn was, of course, at the corner of Taylor and Bush. So my boyfriend lives at the corner of Jones and Bush, so I had walked by that corner many, many times. The building is long gone, but there's absolutely nothing anywhere, no marker to indicate that this important historical event took place there. In 1962, the Tavern Guild was formed by proprietors and employees of several gay bars in response to rising tensions between the police and gay people. This is considered the first gay business association in the United States, and this coalition helped unify and protect gay bars and bartenders by fixing drink prices, developing a phone network to track police raids, and setting up funds for members who were unemployed. They also organized fundraisers and charity events, including the annual Beaux-Arts Ball, and we're going to go to that ball in a few minutes. Guy Straight, who we mentioned earlier, published the first issue of the Lavender Baedeker in 1963. This was based on Carl Baedeker's 1833 guidebook to Europe and quickly was followed by booklets of gay and lesbian-friendly bars, restaurants, and hotels. Bob Dameron, who was a white gay businessman, traveled a lot, and these guidebooks were used by many of us as we visited other cities. I sort of think of it as analogous to the Green Book that African Americans could use to know where it would be safe to eat or to stay. This is an image of Madeline Treth, who was born in Brooklyn and moved to San Francisco. She had her own law firm here. She argued a job discrimination case before the U.S. Supreme Court, and her self-published memoir, Rainbows on My Ceiling, chronicles how in 1962 she met Jan Sibley, a teacher, with whom she spent the next 40 years. They traveled around the world. They attended marches on Washington, the Gay Olympic Games, volunteered with the Castro Lions. They owned their own shop dedicated to feline lovers called Holy Cats. And when Madeline died in 2009, her brother, the renowned gay photographer Arthur Tress, rediscovered in her home vintage prints that he had made in 1964. And that important body of work was later exhibited at the De Young Museum as Arthur Tress, San Francisco, 1964. This is a significant, whoops, my notes just got small. Let me just wet my whistle. June 26, 1964, Life magazine referred to San Francisco as the gay capital of the world, featuring this photograph of the Toolbox, south of Market Gay Bar. Now, when the Toolbox opened on the corner of 4th and Harrison in 1962, it was the first leather bar located south of Market. It was wildly popular and even attracted nationwide media notice. The most celebrated element of the Toolbox was this huge mural you see in the background, painted by Chuck Arnett, who was a local artist. He worked at the bar, and his paintings and posters were also featured in such other bars as the Red Star Saloon and the Ambush. And this article was really important because of the national distribution of Life magazine. So a lot of people saw it and thought, well, if San Francisco is the gay capital of the world, then that's where I'm going to go. The Society for Individual Rights was founded in September 1964. This was the largest homophile organization in the country. It represented a newly assertive and self-confident liberationist attitude and was also more democratic and inclusive, becoming a model for gay political organizations to follow. And in April 1966, SUR opened the first gay community center in America on 6th Street. December 1964, the Council on Religion and the Homosexual was founded by the Reverend Ted McElvaney under the auspices of Glide Memorial Methodist Church with the Daughters of Bilitis and founders Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin. It was dedicated to joining homosexual activists and religious leaders, including representatives of Methodist, Episcopal, Lutheran, and United Church of Christ denominations. On September 26, 1965, 30 people picketed Grace Cathedral to protest punitive actions taken against the Reverend Canon Robert Cromie for his involvement in the CRH. And in 1965, Citizens Alert, a 24-hour hotline supported by the CRH, was established to provide lawyers, photographers, and others assistance to victims of anti-gay police brutality. So here we are, it's New Year's Day, 1965, when attendees of a costume ball at California Hall were harassed by police. Now, this was a fundraiser for the CRH, and they had gotten prior permission, everything should go well, and the police decided to take photographs and harass the attendees. Well, it became a turning point in San Francisco gay rights movement when the ACLU took the case, which was ultimately dismissed. Here we see José Sarria again, 1965. Now he's calling himself the Widow Norton, a reference to Joshua Norton, the much celebrated 19th century San Franciscan who had declared himself Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. So José founded the Imperial Court System, which was a grassroots network of organizations working to build community relationships for equality and to raise money for charitable causes through the production of the annual coronation balls and other fundraising events. In 1965, Peggy Caserta opened one of the first hippie shops on Haight Street. It was a clothing store at 577 Haight at Ashbury, and she named it after a character in the ancient Greek erotic lesbian poetry collection, the Songs of Bilitis, in order to appeal to gay women. So her store became popular as the place to buy bell-bottom jeans, which were being made by her mother in Louisiana and flown to San Francisco. So Caserta eventually struck a deal with Levi Strauss & Company to manufacture its first bell-bottom jeans, which she sold exclusively for the first 6 months. And you might recognize one of her very first customers, Janis Joplin, with whom she became lovers. In 1966, Ricky Stryker opened Maud Study in the Haight-Ashbury district, said to be the world's longest surviving lesbian bar before it closed in 1989. May 21st, 1966, a rally to protest exclusion of homosexuals from the armed forces took place on the steps of the Federal Building on Armed Forces Day. And a coalition of homophile organizations across the country organized similar demonstration. And in Los Angeles, there was a 15-car motorcade, later identified as the nation's first gay pride parade, and there were activists holding pickets in New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. 1966. Here we are in June 1966. Tonight, a clean sweep will be made on Market Street, not by the police, but by the street people who are often the object of police harassment. The drug addicts, pillheads, teenage hustlers, lesbians, and homosexuals who make San Francisco's meat rack their home are tired of living in the midst of the filth thrown out onto the sidewalks and into the streets by nearby businessmen. This vanguard demonstration indicates the willingness of society's outcasts to work openly for an improvement in their own social economic power. We have heard too much about white power and black power, so get ready to hear about street power. On July 18, 1966, about 25 people picketed Compton's cafeteria when new management began using Pinkerton agents and police to harass gay and transgender customers. The next month, August 1966, and we don't know exactly when, Gene Compton's cafeteria at the corner of Turk and Taylor, frequented by Tenderloin street youth, queens, and hustlers whose age and poverty made it difficult to congregate, was the site of a riot. When a police officer tried to grab one of the queens, rather than put up with the harassment, she threw her coffee in his face. Angry queers broke out the windows, threw dishes and trays at the police, and burned down a nearby newsstand. The next day, after Compton's refused to allow drag queens on the premises, a picket line sprang up, and the newly installed plate glass windows were smashed once again. And if you haven't seen Screaming Queens, the riot at Compton's cafeteria, the 2005 documentary done by my friends Susan Stryker and Victor Silverman, I highly recommend it. After the riots, activists established the COG, Conversion Hour Goal, which was a network of transgender social, psychological, and medical support services. And it eventually became the National Transsexual Counseling Unit, the first peer-run support and advocacy organization in the world. August 22nd, 1966, the first National Convention of Gay and Lesbian Groups, the burgeoning National Planning Conference of Homophile Organization, meets in San Francisco. Before it changed its name to the North American Conference of Homophile Organizations, NACO. Hal Call, who we met earlier, March 1967, was one of the men who had emerged as an outspoken homosexual advocate in the Mattachine Society, and he founded the Adonis Bookstore, the first gay bookstore in the United States, on Ellis Street in the Tenderloin. This is just a few months before the Oscar Wilde bookstore opened in New York. The Adonis Bookstore was one of the first places to show gay pornographic films, which continued until Call's death in 2000 at the age of 83. In 1968, Hadi Paul Press published Tales of Sagittarius and Tales of Thorn, collections of poetry by Jim Mitchell. The press was founded during the Summer of Love and soon became an important part of the microecology of gay publishing that was then beginning to emerge. April 1969, after Gail Whittington, an employee of the state's steamship lines, was fired for revealing his homosexuality in a Berkeley newspaper, the Committee for Homosexual Freedom picketed the company's offices, becoming the first gay liberation group in the Bay Area. The daily noontime picketing at State Street Steamship Company, 320 California Street, has become a groovin' spiritual happening. The morale of the picketers has much improved, as has the great springtime weather. The size of the line remains undiminished as dedicated CHF members carry on the only really homosexual activist campaign in quite a while. Every day, picketers sing freedom songs and songs of joy and love, and while they enjoy the sun, hold hands and do what comes naturally. In fact, the picketers on California Street are acting in public just as all homosexuals have been saying for years that we should be able to act in public. They are acting out that statement. People are ready for their freedom when they assume it. And that appeared in the CHF newsletter May 20th, 1969. And in May 69, Tower Records fired Frank Denaro, believing him to be gay, and the CHF picketed that store for several weeks until he was reinstated. And they ran similar pickets at Safeway stores, Macy's, and the Federal Building. So one of the points I made to Lori that 1969 San Francisco was not the benevolent place that it has become. There was a lot of harassment. Here's an article that appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle starting June 30th, 1969. So this is coincidental with the Stonewall riots in New York across the country. The first article was headlined, "Choosing the Gay Way of Life," and was pretty sensational and simplistic, but the activists at the time pounded home a couple of key points for heterosexuals to contemplate. Our lives aren't that much different than yours, and we're not going away. We lesbians live all our lives among you. Except for a few of us, we have heterosexual parents and learn as toddlers to play the heterosexual game. You cannot recognize us unless we choose to let you. And that's a quote from an article in the Ladder, the Daughters of Bilitis publication. Okay, so that brings us up to Stonewall, but I can't not include this. This is October 31st, 1969, Halloween night, when activists gathered outside the San Francisco Examiner building to protest all the many anti-gay articles that had been running. There was, including Robert Patterson's The Dreary Revels of San Francisco Gay Clubs. He described the clientele of these so-called deviant establishment in as many grossly homophobic ways as possible. Femi-males with flexible wrists and hips, the pseudo-fair sex, and women who aren't exactly women. Like many other papers around the country, the Examiner had a policy of printing the names and addresses of men arrested in gay bar raids or in tea rooms. During the demonstration, a big bag of purple printer's ink was dumped from the roof onto the peaceful demonstrators, and they used that ink to scrawl "gay is good" as well as other slogans onto the building, and they put their hands in it and slapped, and you can see, and the event became known as the Friday of the Purple Hand. Okay, one last slide to show how important 1969 was. This is Ted Stahl's image of San Francisco Gay Pride 10 years after Stonewall, and I'm just going to conclude by reading an excerpt from Carl Whitman, Refugees from America, a Gay Manifesto. San Francisco is a refugee camp for homosexuals. We have fled here from every part of the nation, and like refugees elsewhere, we came not because it is so great here, but because it was so bad there. By the tens of thousands we fled small towns where to be ourselves would endanger our jobs and any hope of a decent life. We have fled from blackmailing cops, from families who disowned or tolerated us. We have been drummed out of the armed forces, thrown out of schools, fired from jobs, beaten by punks and policemen. And we have formed a ghetto out of self-protection. It is a ghetto rather than a free territory because it is still theirs. Straight cops patrol us, straight legislators govern us, straight employers keep us in line, straight money exploits us. We have pretended everything is okay because we haven't been able to see how to change it. We've been afraid. In the past year, there has been an awakening of gay liberation ideas and energy. How it began, we don't know. Maybe we were inspired by Black people and their freedom movement. We learned how to stop pretending from the hip revolution. America, in all its ugliness, has surfaced with the war and our national leaders, and we are repulsed by the quality of our ghetto life. Where once there was frustration, alienation, and fetishism, there are now new characteristics among us. We are full of love for each other and are showing it. We are full of anger at what has been done to us. And as we recall all the self-censorship and repression for so many years, a reservoir of tears pour out of our eyes, and we are euphoric, high with the initial flourish of a movement. Thank you very much.
Good job. So we now take to the questions and answers. Jim's going to be in the other seat over there.
The hot seat.
To control the flow of questions, just let me know you have a question, and Beth will come over and pass the mic to you. But let's start with the first question. Where is she in the room? Okay, yeah. So is she in the room with the mic? Here she. So this way the audience, which is remote audience, will be able to follow what's going on through the room.
And I guess there'll be questions from the remote audience, I hope.
Right. Yeah, we will get remote questions as possible as well. So questions from the audience.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And I'm curious, you didn't mention the Castro at all. And can you sort of put the Castro neighborhood in context to that 1969 date?
That's a good question. And I cannot tell you the frustration I felt. There's so many important venues and organizations, but they're all after 1969. So I forced myself to cut off. So I guess the short answer is no. I just remember from personal experience going to some of those early parades, and I found myself, I was telling John this story, I found myself at the Shed, which was right on Market Street. It was a big dance hall. It's where, I don't even know what's there now. And then I needed to get home, and I walked up to catch the bus at the corner of Castro and Market and had no idea that there was this parallel universe, that all of these Castro clones were there, because I was a Polk Street queen, and it was a parallel universe. So we all have our little centers of experience.
And what year or roughly would that have been?
Probably 71, 72. So certainly there were gay bars in the Castro, but nothing like what it was later to become.
We're really a prelude of part two.
Mm-hmm.
Post 69. Need other question?
Not all at once.
Best go check online.
Larry has a question. He just doesn't know it. Well, I wanted us to have the conversation we had about the documentation of the dash. Do you want to give him the mic? Because Larry, before the presentation, had a important question, which I was not able to answer.
Yes, well, I've heard a rumor that, but you mentioned it in the talk, that if you paid $1 at the dash, you could get oral sex. And there was supposedly some police report that states this, and it's all over the internet, but I can't find the original of that anywhere. And I was wondering if you knew where that.
Yes, and unfortunately I didn't. But if there's somebody who wants to go down the rabbit hole and find that, I think it would be really important. As I was telling Larry, when Susan Stryker and I were doing the research for Gay by the Bay, which was published in April of 1996 to coincide with the opening of the Hormel Gay and Lesbian Center at what was then the new main library. And Susan was on the board at the GLBT Historical Society. I was the program manager for the Hormel Center. And so we thought these two organizations should collaborate. And we couldn't quite believe that there was no survey of queer history in the Bay Area. So we thought, well, we'll do an exhibit. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. But if we're going to do an exhibit, let's do an exhibition catalog so we can document all of this. Well, and then somehow the project got flipped and became a book, upon which we later did some exhibits. And I just remember I had a friend working at Chronicle Books at the time, and I said, well, how do we make this happen? And she said, well, just put together a proposal. And so we did. And they said, oh, great, this is exactly what we're looking for. And they said, who's going to write the introduction? And we said, well, how about Armistead Maupin? And it fell to me, I didn't know Armistead at the time, and it fell to me to call him and ask him if he would write the foreword. And this is in the early stages, so this would probably be, let's say, 94, 95, and it was going to have gay and lesbian. It might have said bisexual. I don't know it probably wouldn't even have had transgender at that point. And Armistead, bless his heart, and without missing a beat, he said, oh my God, you're not going to trot out that tired litany, are you? Let's just call it queer. And so I was able to go back to the publisher of Chronicle Books and says, if it's okay with Armistead to put queer in the title, then it should be okay with the rest of us. So I will be forever appreciative.
I'm wondering, does the police department have any files at all that they've ever saved about cases that they've ever arrests or anything? Is there any transparency?
Well, that's what Larry and I were talking about, and he knows more than I do.
The history room at the San Francisco Public Library has some information from about the early 1920s. So there's some bug books and maybe some reports. I can't remember if there were reports, but definitely there are some mug books. And I forget there's some strange terminology that the police used for people that in this one book, but they were gay people. Maybe stuff from the 30s, but nothing earlier.
Yeah, and I think your point about the terminology is hard to do research because they weren't necessarily called gay or queer or even homosexual. They would have been called deviant or other derogatory terminology, beloved that dare not speak its name.
There may also be, there is a report from the grand jury about a group of gay men who were arrested in 1918.
I said one comment. Going through the census of 1930, I found something that was very interesting. Two women together, living together, and they called themselves partners. And they were not in a business situation. And I'm wondering if the census recognized people that consider themselves to be partners in the census. I mean, it's very unusual.
My guess, and it's only a guess, is absolutely not, because remember, there was a big controversy when the census started to collect same-sex partners or same-sex individuals living in the same residence. And that was in the, I don't even know when that was, but I mean, that you may have found an incidence of that, but I don't think this was being
Well,
collected.
I just thought it was interesting. I mean, maybe it wasn't, I don't know what kind of partnership they were in, but you normally just say roommate or somebody living with you, but they had partner, their relationship was
Right.
partner.
Well, and it just speaks to the lack of terminology.
Right.
We still don't have terminology. Partner, romantic partner, life partner, lover, boyfriend. So there are those of us who are married and those of us who are in long-term committed relationships. So, but yeah, I think it's an interesting observation.
It's interesting from my perspective as being a native San Franciscan, and I never got a sense of anybody homosexual going to hit on me. We were living in parallel universes, and people came here because there was plenty of opportunities to live your life. Yes, the cops tried to control it. There was other things that was going on. There was a lot of nasty stuff. But I didn't sense that. I only knew about the black cat. That's all I knew. So it just...
Yeah, I think it speaks to the fact that we're all in our own little universes.
Exactly.
So if we were, communities of color, whatever our community is, that's the center of our universe. And unless we're directly impacted, we have no knowledge or interest in what's going on around the corner.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, sure. Today we have a parade, and there's there's all kinds of displays that were not as noticeable in the 1950s, for example.
Absolutely.
Much
And
more-
that's what I was
discreet,
trying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to impress upon Lori, that the importance of the bravery of her brother
Right.
to do what he did at a time when he did
I've
it.
had a piece of that conversation with Lori, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
The online question is, what was the outcome of the Gayola trial?
Oh my gosh, I don't have my notes. I should know. Can anyone help me? The outcome of the Gayola trial?
I don't remember Gayola trial.
Well, it's a very important trial. I think we make reference to it in Gay by the Bay, but I didn't bring a copy so that I could cheat. So let me see if hand me my notes. Maybe I can make something up and save my... No, that was the other one. Let's see. The Gayola was in... through... Let's see. I'm not doing very well, am I? Well, I'm not. So 56 was the San Mateo County Sheriff. Oh, here it is. May 3rd, 1960, the Gayola scandal was launched. So that a state ABC official caught taking a bribe from the Castaway, a Market Street gay bar. So all I have written is he is later acquitted. So that's all I can say with any assurance.
And any other questions online? Any other questions in the audience? He would take.
At the University Club, Powell in California, the bar of the restaurant has a lot of artifacts and a statue of a black cat. And it's from the black cat. Is it the same black cat that you mentioned was called?
I don't know, Ron. It might be, but the black cat, it turns out there was a black cat bar in Los Angeles. So the black cat is a common symbol. So it could well be, or it might not be. There's also a black cat on Broadway, or at least there was. So definitely maybe.
I'll ask my friend Mike. They have I think it's Benjamin Buffano statue, a marble statue that's damaged on the bar. You rub it and it brings you good luck. It's a black cat. And
Yeah, my intuition would say no, that it's not connected to the black cat, but I could be completely wrong. But interesting.
Yeah, I don't know that symbolism carried very far. You know, everybody knew there was a gay bar, but beyond that, did it carry?
Well, yes, as I said, there was an establishment in Los Angeles. There were probably black cats all over the country.
Right, but they weren't connected. I don't.
No.
Catch.
Yes. Madeline Tress would have the answer.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll thank Jim for the very interesting to me, because I'm not exposed to the same degree of knowledge of this whole process. So I was very informed. And let me just mention next month. Next month we have we're going to go into the bay, and we have a expert on ferry boats. Don't make anything of that.
Oh, wait, so there was an ad campaign for the Sausalito Inn. Take a ferry to Sausalito and take a ferry home.
This was a marine engineer. I don't think he'll be talking in
Probably
those terms
not.
at all. And that will be the end of our this year. We never do December. We never do August. And then we have 3 programs in January, which are very diverse. So I'll leave you to read the blurb when they come out. So, thank you.
Thank you.